A glimmer of green on my finger, an emerald ring I designed myself, became the battlefield where my mother-in-law launched her first attack. Cute costume jewelry. Lydia sniffed at brunch, her wealthy friends nodding in agreement. I wasn't born into their world of privilege and designer labels, but I'd built something they couldn't see. Talent, determination, a thriving jewelry business. As my hands trembled with silent fury, a stranger's voice cut through the tension. Actually, I'm a gemologist. That's a rare Colombian emerald worth 6 figures. In the stunned silence that followed, I realized this wasn't just about a ring. It was about refusing to be diminished by someone else's judgment. I never thought a Sunday brunch would change the course of my relationship. But then again, I never thought I'd be sitting across from a woman who could cut you down with nothing but a perfectly arched eyebrow. My name is Grace Williams. 3 years ago, I walked away from a soul-crushing corporate job to pursue my dream of designing jewelry. My tiny studio apartment doubled as my workshop, with a corner desk overlooking the city where I'd sketched designs late into the night. The corporate world had offered security, but stripped away my creativity one spreadsheet at a time. Now, I was building something that was entirely mine. Dating while trying to launch a business wasn't exactly on my priority list, but then Ethan Parker walked into my life. We met at a coffee shop where I was sketching designs, and he asked about the intricate patterns in my notebook. One conversation turned into dinner, which turned into the most supportive relationship I'd ever experienced. Ethan worked as a software developer for a tech company downtown. He was thoughtful and kind, with an easy smile that made the stress of my day melt away. He believed in my talent even when orders were slow, and understood when I needed to cancel plans to finish a commission. After a year together, things were getting serious, and it was time for me to meet his family. My mom can be intense, Ethan warned as we drove to brunch that Sunday morning. She has strong opinions about everything. I smoothed down the front of my dress, a simple navy blue design I'd made myself with small, hand-embroidered flowers along the hem. I'm sure it'll be fine. Parents usually like me. Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Just don't take anything she says personally, okay? She needs time to warm up to people. I nodded, though an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. On my right hand, I wore my favorite creation, an emerald ring with a delicate silver setting I'd designed myself. The stone had been a splurge, but I'd wanted to prove I could create something truly remarkable. The deep green caught the sunlight as I fidgeted with it, a nervous habit I developed. Lydia Parker had chosen the Wellington, one of those upscale restaurants where they don't list prices on the menu and the waitstaff judge your wine selection. The kind of place where money whispers instead of talks. We arrived exactly on time, but Lydia was already seated, checking her watch with a slight frown that suggested we were somehow late anyway. "Ethan, darling," she said, rising to kiss her son on both cheeks. Her eyes, the same warm brown as Ethan's but considerably colder, swept over me before she extended her hand. "And you must be Grace." "It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Parker," I said, taking her hand. Her grip was firm, her nails perfectly manicured, and the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist probably cost more than my entire apartment. "Lydia, please." She gestured to the chairs. Sit. I've already ordered mimosas." Lydia Parker was the epitome of old money elegance. Her blonde hair was cut in an expensive bob that probably required maintenance every 3 weeks. Her outfit, a cream-colored blouse and tailored pants, looked simple until you noticed the discreet designer labels. Everything about her screamed carefully cultivated status. "So," she said after we'd settled in, "Ethan tells me you make jewelry." The way she said make made it sound like I was stringing together macaroni necklaces at a summer camp. "I design and create custom pieces," I clarified with a smile. "I specialize in silver work and semi-precious stones." "How quaint. And that pays the bills." Her eyebrow arched slightly. Ethan jumped in. "Grace is really talented, Mom. She's building quite a client base." "I'm sure she is." Lydia sipped her mimosa. "Though I always thought you'd end up with someone more conventional. Like Rachel from the Thompsons. She's a pediatrician now, you know." I felt Ethan tense beside me, but kept my smile firmly in place. The corporate world wasn't for me. I'm much happier creating something meaningful. Well, happiness doesn't always pay for retirement, does it? Lydia's smile was razor sharp. But I suppose that's what Ethan is for. Before I could respond, 3 elegantly dressed women approached our table. Lydia brightened immediately, standing to exchange air kisses and introductions. Ladies, this is Grace, Ethan's girlfriend. The slight pause wasn't an accident. Grace, these are my dear friends Patricia Wilson, Susan Taylor, and Margaret Adams. The women gave me the kind of smile that never reached their eyes, the same ones I'd seen at corporate functions when someone was being tolerated rather than welcomed. Lovely to meet you, Patricia said, her gaze sweeping over my homemade dress. That's an interesting outfit. Thank you. I made it myself, I said, straightening my shoulders slightly. Oh. How resourceful, Susan replied with a tone that suggested I'd admitted to dumpster diving. Is that something you learned on Pinterest? Lydia laughed. Grace is quite the crafty one. She makes jewelry, too. Speaking of, Margaret leaned closer, eyes fixed on my right hand. That's an unusual ring. Is it glass? I glanced down at my emerald ring, the piece I was most proud of. No, it's cute for costume jewelry, Lydia interrupted, reaching for my hand without asking. She turned it under the light with a dismissive smile. Did you get it off Etsy or a clearance rack? The table tittered with polite laughter. I felt my face flush, not from embarrassment, but from anger that was building like pressure in a sealed container. My hands began to shake slightly as I pulled away from her grip. Actually, I started but was cut off again. No need to be embarrassed, dear. Not everyone can afford the real thing. Lydia's voice dripped with condescension. When Ethan's father proposed, he gave me a 2-carat diamond from Tiffany's. Anything less just wouldn't have felt serious. I felt Ethan's hand on my knee, a silent plea to let it go. But I was tired of shrinking myself to make room for Lydia's ego. I opened my mouth to respond when a voice came from behind me. Actually, I'm a gemologist. The table fell silent as we all turned to look at the speaker, an older gentleman with silver hair and glasses, sitting at the next table. He had the quiet dignity of someone who knows exactly what they're talking about. That's a rare Colombian emerald, he continued, nodding at my ring. Easily worth 6 figures. Handmade, too. Beautiful work. The silence that followed was deafening. Lydia's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Her friend stared at my ring with new interest, while Ethan looked as shocked as everyone else. The gemologist nodded politely and turned back to his own table, leaving us in the wreckage of Lydia's certainty. And in that moment, everything changed. The rest of brunch passed in a blur of awkward small talk and avoided eye contact. Lydia barely spoke directly to me, focusing instead on drilling Ethan about his latest work project. Her friends, sensing the shift in power dynamics, were suddenly interested in my fascinating creative process, though their questions revealed they knew nothing about jewelry making. Ethan drove us home in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I stared out the window, replaying the gemologist's intervention over and over in my head. It wasn't until we were halfway home that Ethan finally spoke. So, 6 figures? His voice was carefully neutral. I sighed, turning to face him. I designed it myself. The emerald was from an estate sale. A lucky find, really. I never meant to show off or anything. I like wearing it. You designed that? Ethan glanced at my hand, genuine surprise in his voice. Grace, that's incredible. I knew you were talented, but I had no idea you were creating pieces at that level. A small knot formed in my stomach. We'd been dating for over a year, and this was the first time Ethan seemed truly impressed by my work. Had he, like his mother, been humoring me all this time? There's a lot about my business I don't talk about, I admitted. I didn't want to seem like I was bragging. You should brag more, Ethan said with a laugh. My mom certainly does. We pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building, but neither of us moved to get out of the car. I'm sorry about how she treated you, Ethan said quietly. She's protective of me, and she can be judgmental. Judgmental is putting it mildly, I replied. She made up her mind about me before I even opened my mouth. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of stress. She'll come around. She always does eventually. I wasn't so sure, but I nodded anyway. As we walked up to my apartment, memories from the past few years flooded back. The struggle, the doubt, the triumph that brought me to where I was today. 3 years ago, I'd stood in my corporate office, staring at my resignation letter. My boss had laughed when I told him my plans. Jewelry design? That's a hobby, Grace, not a career. The first year had been brutal. I'd sold most of my designer clothes and handbags, remnants of my corporate life, to fund my initial supplies. I'd worked nights at a bar to pay rent while spending days perfecting my craft. I'd cried when I made my first sale, a simple pair of earrings that a woman bought for her daughter's graduation. Then came the turning point. A local gallery owner spotted my work at a small craft fair and invited me to display a few pieces. A well-known photographer's wife bought one of my necklaces, wore it to an industry event, and suddenly my phone was ringing. 6 months later, I created a custom piece for a celebrity stylist that ended up in a magazine spread. I hadn't told Ethan much about that side of my business. When we met, I was still operating primarily through word of mouth and small boutiques. Success had come in waves, and I'd been too busy riding them to stop and explain how far I'd come. That night, I showed Ethan my portfolio, the real one, not the scaled-down version I usually shared. His eyes widened as he flipped through photos of pieces I'd created for clients across the country. Grace, this is... Why didn't you tell me? I shrugged, suddenly feeling vulnerable. I don't know. Maybe I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, or that you'd think I was showing off. Like my mother did, he said softly. Maybe. We ordered takeout and talked late into the night. For the first time, I shared the full story of my journey. The risks, the failures, the moments of sheer terror when I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. And the triumphs. The first time a stranger recognized my work, the day my bank account finally had more than 3 digits, the commission that paid off the last of my student loans. Around midnight, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it. Your mom, I guessed. He nodded. She can wait until tomorrow. But 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. And again. Finally, with an apologetic look, Ethan answered. I could hear Lydia's sharp voice through the speaker as I pretended to clean up our dinner containers. Completely humiliated me in front of my friends. How was I supposed to know about that ridiculous ring? That man was probably planted there. Mom, no one planted anyone, Ethan said wearily. It was just a coincidence. A convenient one. And the way she just sat there, letting me look foolish. What was Grace supposed to do? Apologize for wearing a nice ring. I stopped pretending not to listen and watched Ethan's face as he defended me, sort of. His tone was placating, designed to calm his mother rather than truly stand up for me. Let's just move past it, okay? No harm done. My heart sank a little. No harm done? After the way his mother had deliberately tried to humiliate me? Fine, Lydia snapped. But next time, perhaps she could dress more appropriately for the venue. That homemade dress was hardly suitable for the Wellington. Ethan sighed. Mom, please. Can we talk about this another time? He hung up soon after, giving me a tired smile. Sorry about that. She'll get over it. I nodded, but a seed of doubt had been planted. If I married Ethan, would I always be fighting for respect from his family? Would he always try to placate both sides instead of truly standing with me? That night, as Ethan slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if love was enough when it came with conditions I wasn't sure I could or should meet. She actually said that? About your dress? Harper Bennett nearly dropped her coffee mug in indignation. We were sitting in her sleek downtown office, where she ran her event planning business with military precision and a flair for the dramatic. Harper had been my best friend since college. Where I was reserved, she was bold. Where I overthought, she acted. Her office walls were covered in photos of the high-profile events she'd orchestrated, charity galas, corporate retreats, even a few celebrity weddings. The dress was the least of it, I sighed, recounting the entire brunch disaster. But Ethan he keeps saying she needs time, that she'll warm up to me eventually. Harper rolled her eyes. Men are so naive about their mothers. She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. You know, I heard something interesting about Lydia Parker a few years back, when I was planning the Children's Hospital fundraiser. What? I asked, suddenly curious. Apparently, she wasn't always Mrs. High Society. Word is, she grew up pretty modestly in some small town upstate. Married Richard Parker when she was already in her 30s, much later than was acceptable in their circle. I frowned. How do you know this? Eleanor Williams was on the committee with her. You know Eleanor, 3 martinis and she'll tell you her ATM pin. Harper shrugged. Anyway, she mentioned that Lydia was always overcompensating, trying to prove she belonged. Supposedly, she worked retail before meeting Richard. The information shifted something in my understanding of Lydia. Not enough to excuse her behavior, but enough to see it differently, as fear rather than just snobbery. Fear of being exposed as an imposter in her carefully constructed world. Over the next week, curiosity got the better of me. I found myself searching online archives of local newspapers from the town Harper had mentioned. And there it was, a small announcement about the engagement of local shop assistant Lydia Thompson to businessman Richard Parker. A few social media searches later, I found old photos of a younger, less polished Lydia at what looked like a department store counter. Lydia hadn't been born into wealth, she'd married into it. Her cutting remarks and status obsessions suddenly looked like armor, protection against being seen as unworthy. I didn't get much time to process this revelation before Ethan called, inviting me to a family dinner at his parents' home. Are you sure that's a good idea? I asked hesitantly. It'll be fine, he assured me. Dad will be there this time. He's much more laid back. Ethan's father, Richard Parker, did indeed prove to be more welcoming than his wife. A tall man with Ethan's kind eyes and an easy laugh, he greeted me warmly and asked genuine questions about my work. Lydia, meanwhile, maintained a cool politeness that barely concealed her lingering resentment. Over an elaborate dinner that Lydia made sure to mention she had personally planned with the caterer, the conversation drifted to an upcoming charity auction. I've donated my grandmother's sapphire earrings, Lydia announced, touching her own ears where diamond studs sparkled. They should fetch at least $20,000 for the children's wing. That's very generous, I said sincerely. Lydia smiled thinly. Well, some of us prefer the real thing, not garage workshop pieces. Richard frowned. Lydia. It's just a fact, dear, she cut him off. There's crafting, and then there's craftsmanship. I felt Ethan tense beside me, but noticed he said nothing. Again, he was choosing neutrality over defense. Actually, I said calmly, I've donated a piece to the same auction. A custom necklace. How thoughtful, Lydia replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. I'm sure they have a table for the more accessible items. The dinner continued in this vein, with Lydia taking subtle jabs and Ethan attempting to change the subject rather than address them directly. By the time we left, I felt emotionally drained from maintaining my composure. Your dad is nice, I said on the drive home, deliberately not mentioning Lydia. He liked you, Ethan replied. Mom will come around. She's just set in her ways. I bit back my frustration at his continued excuses for his mother's behavior. Ethan, at some point, set in her ways becomes deliberately cruel. You realize that, right? He sighed. What do you want me to do, Grace? Cut her off. She's my mother. I want you to stand up for me, I said quietly. Not just change the subject when she insults me. Ethan was silent for a long moment. It's complicated. It really isn't, I replied, looking out the window at the passing streetlights. 3 days later, I was working in my studio when my assistant, Mia, poked her head in. There's someone here to see you? She doesn't have an appointment, but she's very insistent. I looked up from the delicate silver work I was soldering to see Lydia Parker standing in my studio doorway, looking as out of place as a peacock in a chicken coop. "Mrs. Parker," I said, setting down my tools. "This is unexpected." "I was in the neighborhood," she said, a transparent lie since my studio was nowhere near her part of town. "Thought I'd see where Ethan's girlfriend works." The way she said "works" made it clear she expected to find a hobby table in a garage, not the professional space I'd built. My studio was small but well-equipped, a main workspace with specialized tools, a small gallery area for client consultations, and a tiny office in the back. "Well, you're just in time," I said, gathering my composure. I was about to meet with a client. "Would you like a tour first?" Something flickered in Lydia's eyes, surprise, perhaps, that I wasn't flustered by her appearance. "If you have time," she said coolly. I showed her around, explaining my process and the specialized equipment I'd invested in. I pointed out the custom pieces displayed in my small gallery area, including several that had been featured in national publications. "This one was commissioned for a client's 25th anniversary," I explained, showing her a necklace with interwoven gold and platinum strands. "The stones are selected to represent birthstones of their family members." Lydia studied it with grudging interest. "And people pay well for this type of customization?" "They do," I confirmed, not elaborating on just how well. "Most of my clients come through referrals now." As if on cue, Mia appeared again. "Your 2 o'clock is here, Grace." A woman in her 40s entered, dressed in the kind of casual luxury that spoke of real wealth, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. "Caroline, it's good to see you again." I greeted her warmly. "This is Lydia Parker, Ethan's mother." She stopped by for a quick tour. Caroline's eyes lit up. "Oh, you're Ethan's mom. Grace has mentioned him. You must be so proud. Your son found quite a talent." She turned to me. "My sister absolutely loved the bracelet you made for her birthday. Now my mother wants something special for her 70th. I introduced them properly, watching as Lydia's perception visibly shifted. Caroline Westfield was exactly the type of client Lydia would respect. Old money, impeccable social connections, the kind of person whose approval Lydia would covet. "I have some initial sketches based on what we discussed," I told Caroline, leading her to my consultation table. I glanced back at Lydia. "Feel free to look around more, Mrs. Parker. Mia can show you some of our catalogs." For the next hour, I worked with Caroline on design concepts while Lydia hovered nearby, pretending to browse but clearly listening to every word. By the time Caroline left, after booking a follow-up appointment and leaving a substantial deposit, Lydia had a strange expression on her face. "You're actually successful," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I am," I replied simply. "It didn't happen overnight, but yes, I've built something I'm proud of." Lydia looked around the studio again, this time truly seeing it. "Ethan never mentioned the extent of your business." "Ethan doesn't know everything about my client list or finances," I admitted. "I've always been independent that way." "Why wouldn't you tell him?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. I considered my answer carefully. "I guess because I wanted him to love me for who I am, not what I've achieved or how much I earn." Something shifted in Lydia's expression, recognition, perhaps. For a moment, I wondered if that had been her approach with Richard all those years ago. "Well," she said finally, gathering her designer handbag, "I should be going. Thank you for the enlightening tour." As she reached the door, she paused. "That emerald ring. Did you really make it yourself?" "I did," I confirmed. "Every piece of it." She nodded once, sharply, and left without another word. I stood in the sudden silence of my studio, wondering if anything had truly changed, or if I'd just given Lydia new ammunition for a different kind of judgment. Either way, I realized one thing with perfect clarity. I would never shrink myself for her approval again. The question was whether Ethan would stand beside me at full height, or continue trying to make me small enough to fit into the box his mother had created. Lydia's unexpected visit to my studio lingered in my mind over the next few days. I hadn't heard from her since, but Ethan mentioned she'd been unusually quiet about me during their weekly phone call. I wasn't sure if that was progress or the calm before another storm. Saturday morning found Ethan and me in my tiny kitchen, the scent of coffee filling the apartment as rain tapped against the windows. These quiet mornings were my favorite, just us, without family expectations or social pretenses. I was thinking, Ethan said, sliding a mug toward me across the counter. Maybe we could look at that apartment on Maple Street again. The two-bedroom with the extra space that could work as your studio. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. Are you sure? It's more expensive than what we talked about. I think we can make it work. He hesitated. Actually, I got a promotion. I was going to surprise you with dinner tonight, but... He grinned. Ethan, that's amazing. I threw my arms around him. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I wanted to be sure it was official. Plus, with all the tension with my mom, it never seemed like the right time. I pulled back slightly, my smile fading. About that. We need to talk about what happened at dinner the other night. Ethan's expression shifted, that familiar avoidance creeping in. Grace, she's trying. In her own way. Is she? Because making snide comments about garage workshop pieces doesn't feel like trying. I moved to sit at my small dining table. And that's not even what bothers me the most. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. You didn't say anything, Ethan. You just sat there. Again. He frowned. What was I supposed to do? Create a scene at dinner? Standing up for me isn't creating a scene. It's showing that you respect me enough not to let someone insult me, even if that someone is your mother. She's family, Grace. It's complicated. And what am I? The question hung in the air between us. If we're talking about moving in together, about building a life together, where do I fit in that family picture? Because right now, it feels like I'm expected to just tolerate whatever she dishes out. Ethan sat across from me, running a hand through his hair. You don't understand what she's like when she's upset. It's easier to just keep the peace. I finished for him. That's the thing, Ethan. It's only peaceful for everyone else, not for me. What do you want from me? Frustration edged into his voice. I don't need you to protect me. I can handle Lydia's comments. What I need is to know that you're on my side, that you respect me enough to say something when she crosses a line. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he finally said. I've been trying to keep everyone happy, and it's not fair to you. No, it's not. I reached across the table to take his hand. Ethan, I love you. But I can't spend my life walking on eggshells around your mother while you pretend not to notice. Something shifted in his expression, a resolution forming. I'll talk to her. Really talk to her this time. Thank you. I squeezed his hand, hoping this time would be different. The next day, Ethan drove to his parents' house alone. I spent the afternoon in my studio, trying to focus on a commission but constantly checking my phone. 3 hours later, he called. How did it go? I asked, setting down my tools. About as well as expected. His voice sounded tired. I told her she needed to respect you and treat you with common courtesy, or she risked pushing both of us away. And she acted like I'd slapped her. Said she was just being honest and that I never complained before when she expressed concerns about previous girlfriends. I closed my eyes. What did you say to that? I told her you weren't just another girlfriend, that I love you and I'm serious about our future together. A warm feeling spread through my chest despite the tension of the situation. Thank you for saying that. Then she got defensive, Ethan continued. Said you were using me to climb the social ladder and that I was too blind to see it. The warmth in my chest curdled into anger. She what? I know, it's ridiculous. I told her so. He sighed heavily. I don't think she's going to apologize, Grace. At least not right away. But I made my position clear. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was something. Ethan had finally drawn a line, and that meant more to me than any forced apology from Lydia ever could. The following weekend, I drove upstate to visit my parents. The familiar sight of their modest home, with its slightly overgrown garden and wind chimes hanging from the porch, always settled something in me. My mother, Sarah, was pruning roses when I arrived, her gardening hat shielding her face from the sun. There's my girl, she called, setting down her shears to envelop me in a hug that smelled of earth and the lavender lotion she'd used for as long as I could remember. My father, David, appeared from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd been a high school science teacher for 30 years before retiring, and he still had that patient, observant way about him. "Just in time," he said, hugging me. "Your mother made enough food to feed half the county." Inside, over my mother's famous lasagna, I told them about Lydia, the brunch, and everything that had followed. They listened without interrupting, exchanging glances occasionally in that silent communication long-married couples perfect. "Sounds like she's deeply insecure," my father said when I finished. "People who are secure in themselves don't need to tear others down." "Your father's right," my mother added, refilling my water glass. "But the real question is, how does Ethan respond to all this?" I shared the details of our recent conversation and his confrontation with his mother. My father nodded approvingly. "Good. It's about time." "But," I prompted, sensing his reservation. "But it shouldn't have taken an ultimatum from you," he said gently. "A partnership means standing together from the beginning, not just when your back is against the wall." His words resonated with the doubt I'd been trying to ignore. "You built something from nothing, Gracie," my mother said, using my childhood nickname. "You took a risk most people are too afraid to take, and you made it work. Don't let anyone make you feel small for that, not even Ethan's mother." "And not Ethan," my father added quietly. Later that night, after my parents had gone to bed, I sat on the porch swing, looking up at the stars visible here in a way they never were in the city. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Mom's planning the annual charity gala next month. Wants the whole family there, including you." I frowned. The annual gala was Lydia's pride and joy, a high society event she'd apparently been running for years. It was surprising she'd want me there after everything that had happened. "Are you sure?" I texted back. "She specifically mentioned you," came his reply. I wasn't convinced, but I agreed, wanting to believe this was Lydia's way of extending an olive branch. A week later, Ethan called me at the studio, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You won't believe what she did," he said without preamble. "What happened?" "The invitations for the gala went out. Everyone in the family got one. Except you." My stomach dropped. "Oh." I called her, and she had the nerve to say it was an oversight. Then she said it was strictly invite only, and they had reached capacity. "Ethan. It's bullshit, Grace. She's doing this on purpose." Part of me wanted to let it go, to stay home that night and avoid another confrontation with Lydia. But a stronger part, the part that had walked away from security to build something of my own, refused to be so easily dismissed. "I'll talk to her myself," I said. "No need," Ethan replied grimly. "I already did. I told her if you're not welcome, then I'm not coming either." I was touched by his stance, but worried about forcing the issue. "Are you sure? This gala is important to her." "You're important to me," he said simply. "More important than some party." After we hung up, I sat at my workbench, turning one of my latest designs in my hands. It was a necklace featuring a cascade of small, perfect stones in varying shades of blue, designed to catch light with every movement. I thought about Lydia, about her thinly veiled contempt and the wall she'd built between us. And I thought about something Harper had mentioned weeks ago. I picked up my phone and called her. "Harper Bennett Events, how can I direct your call?" Her assistant's voice answered. "Hi, Jamie, it's Grace. Is Harper available?" A moment later, Harper came on the line. "Please tell me you're calling to commission a spectacular piece for my birthday," she said by way of greeting. I laughed. "Your birthday was last month, and I already gave you earrings. A girl can dream. What's up?" "The Parker Charity Gala," I said. "You're handling it, aren't you?" There was a pause. "How did you know that?" "You mentioned working with the hospital foundation a while back." I connected the dots. "Well, yes. Lydia Parker is the committee chair, but the foundation hired me to coordinate." "Why?" I took a deep breath. "I need a favor." 2 weeks later, I stood outside the grand ballroom of the Bristol Hotel, gathering my courage. Through the glass doors, I could see the gala in full swing. Elegant dresses, tuxedos, champagne flutes catching the light from crystal chandeliers. I wore a gown I designed myself, midnight blue silk that fell in simple, elegant lines. Around my neck was the cascade necklace I'd been working on, the stones shifting from pale to deep blue like captured starlight. My emerald ring caught the light as I reached for the door. Harper met me in the foyer, resplendent in a red gown that commanded attention. "You look amazing," she said, kissing my cheek. "Ready to make an entrance?" I nodded, though my heart was pounding. "Is Ethan here?" "At the bar with his father. Lydia's by the stage, micromanaging the auction display." Harper's eyes gleamed with mischief. Perfect timing. The Westfields just arrived. Caroline Westfield, my client from the studio, entered with an older man I assumed was her husband. She spotted me immediately and waved, making her way over. "Grace, that necklace is extraordinary," she exclaimed, examining it up close. "Did you just finish it?" "Last week," I confirmed. "It's part of my new collection." "I need to introduce you to some people," Caroline said, taking my arm. "My sister is here, and she's been raving about the bracelet you made her." With Caroline beside me, I entered the ballroom. I spotted Ethan immediately, his back to me as he talked with his father. Then I saw Lydia, standing near the auction tables, her expression freezing as she noticed me. Before she could approach, Caroline had whisked me across the room, introducing me to a circle of friends. "This is the artist I was telling you about," she kept saying, showcasing my necklace like it was a prized possession. I caught glimpses of Ethan searching the crowd, then his face lighting up when he spotted me. He made his way over just as a well-known actress joined our circle, admiring the necklace and asking for my card. "You're here," Ethan said, slipping an arm around my waist. "And apparently holding court. Harper invited me," I explained. "Professional courtesy, since I donated a piece to the auction." His eyes widened slightly. "Does my mother know?" "She does now," I said, nodding toward Lydia, who was watching us from across the room, her expression unreadable. The evening progressed in a whirlwind of introductions and conversations. People who wouldn't have given me a second glance at Lydia's brunch now wanted to discuss my designs, my process, my inspiration. I caught sight of the gemologist from the brunch, now properly introduced to me as Dr. Alan Foster, a respected appraiser who worked with several auction houses. "Your work is exceptional," he told me, examining the necklace with a professional eye. "Have you considered a more prominent showcase? I know several galleries that would be interested." As we talked, I was acutely aware of Lydia hovering nearby, trying to appear engaged in conversation while clearly listening to every word. When a photographer from a local society magazine approached to take my picture, she materialized at my side, positioning herself in the frame. "Mrs. Parker," the photographer said politely, "could you step aside? We're doing a feature on emerging artists represented in the auction." The look on Lydia's face as she was gently moved out of the frame would have been comical if it weren't so revealing of her wounded pride. Later, as I stood by the auction tables examining the other donations, I overheard a conversation that wasn't meant for my ears. "That's Grace Williams, the jewelry designer," someone said in a hushed voice. "Her pieces are becoming quite sought after." "Really?" another voice replied. "Imagine being rude to her. She's about to go global." I turned slightly to see Lydia standing frozen nearby, having clearly heard the same exchange. Our eyes met briefly before she turned and walked away, shoulders rigid with dignity. The gala marked a turning point, not just in how others perceived me, but in how I perceived myself. For years, I downplayed my success, worried that owning it fully would make me seem arrogant or unlikable. But that night, surrounded by people who valued my work, I finally allowed myself to embrace what I'd built. Ethan was different after the gala too. Seeing me through others' eyes had shifted something in him, a new respect that shouldn't have been necessary but was transformative nonetheless. He called me the next morning, his voice warm with pride. "My phone's been blowing up," he said. "Dad's golf buddies keep asking if I can get their wives' appointments with you." I laughed, cradling the phone as I sketched at my workbench. "I guess they liked the necklace. They liked everything about you." His voice grew serious. I'm sorry, Grace. For what? For not seeing it earlier. How talented you are. How much you've accomplished on your own. The apology was sincere, but it left me with mixed feelings. Why had it taken external validation, other people's admiration, for him to fully appreciate what I'd been showing him all along? 3 days after the gala, Ethan called me from his parents' house. I could tell from his voice something had happened. Mom cornered me after dinner, he said. Asked if I was sure about us. My heart tightened. What did she mean by that? She said you seemed very public, very ambitious. Like those were bad things. He sounded angry. She asked if I was prepared to be with someone who might outshine me someday. What did you say? I held my breath. I told her yes. Because you don't need my name. You made your own. His words warmed me, but they also crystallized something I'd been feeling since the gala. This wasn't about jewelry or social status anymore. It was about whether Lydia could accept a daughter-in-law who couldn't be controlled or diminished. The following week, I received a text from Lydia herself, the first direct communication we'd ever had outside of face-to-face interactions. Would you meet me for lunch tomorrow? Just the two of us. I stared at my phone, suspicion warring with hope. After consulting with Harper, who advised me to go, but wear emotional armor, I agreed to meet Lydia at a small French bistro downtown. She was already seated when I arrived, perfectly put together as always, but with a certain tension around her eyes. She stood as I approached, offering a stiff smile. Grace, thank you for coming. I took the seat across from her. I was surprised to hear from you. She arranged her napkin in her lap, with precise movements. Yes, well, I thought it was time we spoke privately. The waiter appeared, and we both ordered salads neither of us seemed particularly interested in eating. When he left, Lydia took a small sip of water and met my eyes directly. You made quite an impression at the gala, she said. Caroline Westfield called me the next day, singing your praises. Caroline's been very supportive of my work, I replied neutrally. Indeed. Lydia's fingers tapped lightly on the tablecloth. You've come a long way since we first met. I recognized the comment for what it was, not quite a compliment, more an acknowledgement tinged with condescension. I haven't changed, Mrs. Parker. You're just seeing what was always there. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Perhaps. Though you must admit, your presentation has become more polished. My work has always been polished, I said evenly. That's never been the issue between us. Then what do you think the issue is? She asked, a challenge in her voice. I considered deflecting, keeping things pleasant. But we were past that point. I think you decided who I was the moment you heard what I did for a living, I said quietly. You assumed I was playing at being an artist, that I couldn't possibly be successful or talented enough for your son. Lydia's expression tightened. You have to understand, Ethan has always been impressionable, too willing to see the best in people. That's not a flaw, Mrs. Parker. It is when people take advantage of it. She leaned forward slightly. Do you know how many women have tried to use him for his family connections? His financial security? I felt a flare of anger, but kept my voice level. I'm not interested in either of those things. I've built my own career, my own connections. So I've gathered. Her tone was difficult to read. Though you certainly didn't mind using Harper's connection to attend my gala. After you deliberately excluded me? I raised an eyebrow. I think we can agree neither of us has behaved perfectly. A flash of surprise crossed her face, as though she hadn't expected me to acknowledge my own part in our tension. No, she conceded. We haven't. Our salads arrived, creating a momentary reprieve. We both picked at the food, the pretense of a normal lunch growing thinner by the minute. I want what's best for Ethan, Lydia finally said. That's all I've ever wanted. So do I replied. But I think we have different ideas about what that means. Clearly. She set down her fork. He's changed since meeting you. Become more assertive. Is that a bad thing? He challenged me, she said, a hint of hurt in her voice. He's never done that before. I took a deep breath. Mrs. Parker, with all due respect, Ethan is 32 years old. He should be able to express his own opinions, especially when someone he cares about is being mistreated. Mistreated? She looked genuinely affronted. I was simply being cautious. You were being cruel, I said quietly but firmly. And I won't tolerate it anymore. Not the snide comments, not the backhanded compliments, not the social manipulations. Lydia's face flushed. So you're cutting me out? Turning my son against me? I'm just refusing to shrink anymore, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. Ethan loves you. That won't change. But our relationship, yours and mine, needs to change if we're going to be in each other's lives. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the perfect facade. For just a moment, I glimpsed uncertainty, perhaps even a flicker of regret. Then it was gone, replaced by the polished mask I'd come to know. I see, she said, reaching for her purse. She placed money on the table, enough to cover both our barely touched meals. I should be going. I have a committee meeting this afternoon. I didn't stop her as she stood to leave. But at the last moment, she paused. You know, I wasn't always a Parker, she said, not quite looking at me. I worked for everything I have. It was as close to a personal revelation as she'd ever offered. I know, I said simply. Her eyes snapped to mine, surprise evident. Then, without another word, she left, her heels clicking sharply on the restaurant floor. I sat alone at the table, wondering if I'd just made things worse or if, perhaps, we'd finally reached a turning point of understanding. The weeks following my lunch with Lydia were surprisingly quiet. Ethan reported that his mother hadn't mentioned me during their weekly calls, neither positively nor negatively. It was as if she'd placed our relationship in a holding pattern while she decided how to proceed. Meanwhile, my professional life took an unexpected turn. The necklace I'd worn to the gala caught the attention of a buyer from Bellamy's, a luxury department store with locations in major cities across the country. After several meetings and a thorough review of my portfolio, they offered me a featured spot in their fine jewelry section. The morning the story broke in the fashion press, Ethan brought coffee to my studio and spread the magazine across my workbench. Rising star, Grace Williams brings fresh vision to fine jewelry, he read, grinning. Look at that photo. You look amazing. The article featured a professional shot of me in my studio, tools in hand, surrounded by my creations. The writer had focused on my journey from corporate dropout to respected designer, highlighting my commitment to craftsmanship and unique aesthetic. They want 5 exclusive pieces for the launch, I said, still somewhat in disbelief. And they're talking about a holiday collection, if those do well. Of course they'll do well. Ethan kissed the top of my head. I've been showing this to everyone at work. My team thinks I'm insufferable. You're proud, I corrected, leaning into him. Damn right I am. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. You did this, Grace. All of it. That evening, as we were preparing dinner in my apartment, Ethan's phone rang. His expression tightened when he saw the caller ID. It's my mom, he said, hesitating before answering. I could only hear his side of the conversation, but his responses were measured, adult. No placating, no walking on eggshells. Just honest communication. Yes, I saw the article. No, I didn't know about it beforehand. Because it's Grace's career, Mom, not mine to announce. When he hung up, he looked thoughtful. She read the article, he said. She actually sounded impressed. In her way. Meaning? She said she could see why Bellamy's was interested. That your designs have a certain unique quality. He raised his eyebrows. From her, that's practically a standing ovation. I laughed, but the acknowledgement meant more than I wanted to admit. 3 days later, a cream-colored envelope arrived at my studio, my name written in elegant script. Inside was a note card embossed with Lydia's initials. Grace. I saw the article in Style Monthly. Your feature in Bellamy's is well-deserved. Your craftsmanship shows dedication and vision. I may have been hasty in my initial assessment. For that, I hope we can move forward with a better understanding. Regards, Lydia Parker. It wasn't exactly an apology. The words, I'm sorry, were notably absent, but coming from Lydia, it was significant. An acknowledgement of wrongdoing, however oblique, and a tentative olive branch. I showed the note to Ethan that night. Will you respond? He asked. I considered the question. I think so. Not right away, though. I need to decide what moving forward actually looks like. A week later, Richard invited us to dinner at their home, a smaller, more intimate gathering than previous occasions. When we arrived, Lydia greeted us at the door, her usual perfection in place, but her manner subtly different. Grace, she said with a nod. That's a lovely blouse. Thank you, I replied, accepting the small compliment for the peace offering it was. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Richard asked about the Bellamy's collection, showing genuine interest in my creative process. Ethan talked about his latest project at work, the promotion now public knowledge. Lydia was quieter than usual, listening more than speaking. When she did contribute, her comments were neutral, sometimes even supportive. No barth compliments, no shatel dix. After dinner, as Ethan helped his father select a wine from the cellar, Lydia and I found ourselves alone in the living room. I received your note, I said, breaking the silence. Thank you. She nodded, adjusting a flower arrangement that didn't need adjusting. The article was well written. They captured your dedication. They did. I paused, then decided to extend my own olive branch. I'm working on some new designs for the launch. I'd appreciate your eye, actually. You have excellent taste. Lydia looked up, surprise evident in her expression. You want my opinion? On the presentation, yes. You understand how to make an impact in certain circles. That knowledge has value. Something like respect flickered in her eyes. I'd be happy to help. It wasn't friendship, not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was a beginning, a foundation of mutual respect that might, with time and effort, grow into something more substantial. On the drive home, Ethan reached over and took my hand. That went better than I expected. Your mom was trying, I agreed. I can meet her halfway. He squeezed my hand. Thank you for that. For being the bigger person. It's not about being bigger, I said, watching the city lights stream past the window. It's about knowing my own worth isn't dependent on her approval. 2 weeks later, Ethan and I sat on the roof deck of his apartment building, a bottle of wine between us, as we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. We'd been discussing our future more seriously, where to live, what we wanted long-term. I've been thinking, Ethan said, refilling our glasses, about us, about the next step. My heart quickened. What kind of next step? The forever kind. He reached into his pocket, then seemed to reconsider. I'm not proposing. Not exactly. Not yet. I raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of knots for one sentence. He laughed. What I mean is, I want to do this right. And I realized something. I don't want to pick out a ring for you. Oh. I wasn't sure where he was going with this. I want you to design it, he said simply. Your own ring. Not because of what happened with my mother or to prove anything to anyone, but because no one else could create something that truly represents you, represents us, the way you could. The sincerity in his voice moved me deeply. This wasn't just about jewelry or even about marriage. It was about respect for my craft, my vision, my independence. I'd like that, I said softly. No rush, he added. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know that's where we're headed. If you want that too. I do, I said, the words carrying weight beyond the moment. That night, back in my apartment, I took out the emerald ring that had started everything. I slipped it onto my finger, remembering the brunch, the gemologist's intervention, Lydia's shocked face. So much had changed since that day. I had changed, not by becoming someone else, but by refusing to be less than who I already was. I thought about the ring I might design for our future, what stones I would choose, what shape would suit my hand, what story it would tell. But most of all, I thought about what I had learned through all of this. That true respect isn't granted by others. It begins with respecting yourself. I caught my reflection in the window, the emerald glinting in the low light, and smiled. I never needed Lydia's approval. I just needed to stop letting her define me. And in refusing to shrink, I had finally found room to grow, into myself, into my work, and into a future built on mutual respect and genuine love. The emerald ring would always have a special place in my collection. Not because of its value or even its beauty, but because it had taught me the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the things that challenge us most are the very things that set us free. What would you sacrifice for respect? Your silence, your pride, or the comfort of fitting in? If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share for more tales of finding strength in unexpected moments.